whoever's going to set the rules and standards is going to dominate the global politics, the global economy, and the global security.
Welcome to Talk with Sherryn, where we bring together leaders shaping the future of banking, technology, and innovation across the region. I'm your host, Sherryn de Vos, Conference Director for the Middle East Banking Innovation Summit. Today, I'm joined by Jawad Raza, a Chief AI and Data Officer and a trusted advisor to enterprises across the GCC on AI strategy, data, and large-scale transformation. He is known for helping organizations navigate high-stakes AI decisions where strategy, infrastructure, and execution intersect. Jawad, thank you so much for joining me. I am thrilled to have you on board. Welcome, and to start us off, let's translate that intro into English. What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Thank you, Sharon. I've been looking forward to your podcast, and I'm really happy to be here. And I appreciate the opportunity. What do I do? In one line, I solve problems and deliver on AI. It's as simple as that.
That's amazing.
When it comes to AI, things get very complicated. If you zoom up really high, 40,000 feet, it's about geopolitics, it's about trade, it's about supply chains, it's about future dominance. And that's why suddenly things get very complicated, and decisions that are going to be taken now are going to have impact going out into the decade. So that's where I come in.
One of the reasons why, I came across you and I asked you to join me on this podcast was a really good LinkedIn post that you put up about a week or so ago, where you were talking about scaling AI in the real world, and you're talking about where infrastructure within the organization becomes an actual bottleneck. So I want to go into that because not a lot of people talk about that. People talk about what is the future of AI, and everyone's talking about the potential. But you said something really interesting in that article. You said at scale, AI stops being a technology problem and becomes an infrastructure problem. So let's delve into, what does that shift actually look like inside a real organization?
That is a very, very good question, an important question at the board level. And especially if you're a big or a small organization, the answers are different. Let me start off with, let's say, the board. What is a board's strategic objective? One is certainty. We're living in an environment where there's a lot of uncertainty, volatility. They want decisions that have a certain outcome, an asymmetric strategy where the upside is high and the risk is as little or as small or as limited as possible. Second thing that they look for in AI, if you don't have that at the board level, suddenly things get complicated. And the second thing they look for a lot of things, but let me just give you two things. The second thing they look for is growth. So if you're going to go down and invest so much money in AI, where's the growth going to come from? Okay. So if you look at, let me just start from the global level and bring it down to the corporate level. Okay. China is more state-led, open source, cheap AI outsourcing model. Okay. US, in Washington relies on private corporations to invest in AI. They're about infrastructure build out, and their AI strategy is being formulated by national security.
Yeah.
Okay. So they have acts like not selling chips to CCP, which is China Act. They have act like the Chip Security Act, which actually tracks where the chips are around the world. Okay. So suddenly at scale, when you go at scale, it's not about the model. It suddenly bring your infrastructure actually decides what decisions you're gonna take. Yeah. So let's say there's amazing chips that are being manufactured by China. It's called the Ascend chip, but there's chips that are then made by NVIDIA, right? And US said they're not going to sell it to China. So if you're in a data center such as Hawaii, suddenly you're not going to get the best chips in the world. Ascend is not a bad chip, but you're not going to get the best chip in the world because they're not going to sell it to the Chinese. And the tracking system means they're going to actually see where it's dispersed around the world. So if you go towards the US side, they have bottlenecks. They have problems in energy. So compare that to China, For example, they have 100% margin on energy, while US only has 10 to 15% margin on energy. Energy is something we'll talk about later when it comes to infrastructure. I'm going to lay this down. China is now for 200 graduate programs, right? They don't have a bottleneck on human resource. They have 2,000 graduate programs, and the AI research out, the number of AI research they put out is more than US, Europe, and UK combined in a year.
Wow.
And they get 40% citations globally on the AI research.
Wow.
So they're booming ahead really fast. Okay. And then there's Europe. Okay. They have gone towards a tech sovereignty. And in the recent summit, early in 2025, you'd have heard the vice president of the US criticizing the AI regulations of EU. And so these Europe and US have diverged. And within that, UK has come closer to the US. So they have diverged away from. So suddenly, let's say I'm a business and I want to go into the European market. I have to, so I'm giving you this example where infrastructure actually becomes a problem. So I'm a business and I have to go into the European market, and I have an infrastructure that cannot comply with the EU AI Act. So I will not have access to that market, and I won't have problems getting licensing in that market. So it's not the AI problem. Because once you build AI, you need to be able to sell it, to trade it, and expand it globally if you're a big corporate, right? So if I can't comply, I will not be able to access that market. So what we are seeing right now, it becomes seriously complicated for big players, right? Around the globe, if you're not complying to those standards, right? So what is happening underneath that people are not realizing? It's not a race for tech. It's a race for setting rules and standards. Whoever is going to set the rules and standards is going to dominate the global politics, the global economy, and the global security. So as a corporate, you need to be on the right path and think what your strategic objectives are. If you're not multinational, you can think about local. And in local, if you have energy problems, right? If you have problems with electricity, if you have problems with cooling, you can go towards the Chinese model, right? And if your scale is not big enough, because their AI models, for example, and the AI frameworks such as Paddle are good enough for a small SME. So you might as well go there and save the costs, right? So let's say, and the other aspect of scale, so if you're going towards an LLM, we're talking about huge amount of costs, right? In terms of tokenization, right? So for 1 million tokens, DeepSeek versus ChatGPT, DeepSeek is 40x cheaper than ChatGPT.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's for 1 million tokens is $0.15 for DeepSeek and $2.5 for ChatGPT.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, and if you're talking about DeepSeek's R1 model versus their ChatGPT first model that they came out with, it's the same thing. It's 40x cheaper. So that's what I'm saying. At scale, infrastructure makes the decisions, not the model. And DeepSeek is good enough for a small organization. It's also good enough for a lot of use cases, right? Although I read what NIST has to say, National Institute for Standards and Technologies in the US, and they compare different models together, they will say DeepSeek is 35% or 30% below our latest model. But that's biased, right? Early in 2025, DeepSeek and ChatGPT, in terms of performance, they were 9.3% apart. At the end of 2025, they're only 1.3% apart.
Wow.
Okay, there's an index for AI which you can compare and how far the performance is on two of these models. So that's why I keep on saying your strategy should align. And the end of the day, it's not about the models. It'll be the infrastructure that's going to decide make you forced to do a lot of decisions, because at the end of the day, you got to make a model, you got to sell it, you're going to make sure it goes around the globe. But if you can't, then you're just stuck with it. Because right now, the environment is the governance and AI rules and standards, it's fragmented around the world. Okay? So if I'm in the EU, coming back to my example, if I come back to the EU, if I don't comply, EU has an AI Act, which means it's a law, which means it has penalties, administrative penalties that they can apply upon you. You know how much they are? They're
Tell
7%
me.
of your total turnover annually,
Oh,
or 35 million euros, whichever is higher. There's
what?
serious implications of getting your infrastructure wrong. And that's what I keep advocating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So if I'm a small SME and I want to work in Qatar, I can be here. For
Mm.
me, for a small company, diffusion policies matter a lot. So, for example, if I'm in Qatar, or if I am in China as well, they give you vouchers and tokens to use the cloud for free.
Okay.
So I can scale my startup really fast because I don't have to pay for infrastructure.
Okay.
And beyond that, there's help as well.
Okay.
Right? So if
Right.
I'm in China, they give a lot of tokens and vouchers for a new startup, so they don't have problems getting their compute and AI infrastructure up and ready. So
Right.
it depends which maturity scale you're at, right from a startup to a small SME to a corporate. There's serious implications and decisions you're going to make in terms of infrastructure you're going to get into, right? So
Yeah.
there's cost impacts, there's political impacts, there's trade impacts, there's supply chain impacts. Oh, talking about supply chain, let's say if you go for a hyperscaler whose supply chain is not that great, they
Okay.
don't have access to minerals to produce chips, your growth is going to get stunted because you're not going to get any more chips into that from
Yeah.
that vendor, from that
Mm.
hyperscaler. So you got to make sure you're picking the right side. So if you pick the Chinese side, they don't have high compute chips, only the US has it. Right?
Okay.
So if your game is on high compute chips, so if you're really on top of the game with AI and you want to go on
Mm.
the, let's say, big neo data centers, so a smaller data center would be 20 to 30 megawatts, right? A neo AI data center would be 100 megawatts. And it will require tremendous amount of chips, which you can probably only get from the US. And that's where they're far ahead, right?
Right.
Now, like me, another example where this is going to be a problem. But the difference between a 20, 30 megawatt data center and a 100 megawatt data center in terms of heat and cooling is massive. 100 megawatt data center produces so much amount of heat that your incident timing goes down to seconds. So let's say if a 20 or 30 megawatt data center, the cooling is out, you might be able to respond in 2 to 3 minutes. With a neo data center, it's seconds. So you need to ensure that they have the right
Wow.
tools and the capabilities to come over that incident. Otherwise, your business is going to
Yeah.
be
It's just
off.
not good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you know where your decisions come
Amazing.
from? So that's why I try to preach to the board. It's much more than looking at the models, at the data, at your data scientists. It's a bigger play here. What are you trying to achieve? So once you start to get scaling up, all those problems are 10x, 50x more problematic. It's just like having a prop plane or propeller plane and then building an A380
Yeah.
where you have 400 passengers and you take care of logistics, you have to take care of catering, you have to take care of fuel, mileage, engines. You know, the airports got changed when the A380 came down. You
Mm.
know, they had to reconfigure all the airports around
Yeah.
the world for that, and it cannot land everywhere else.
Yeah.
So it's a similar sort of analogy. So that's what I keep on preaching and advising people. I'm sorry, Seth, put a whole list down here, but on this one question you just asked me, I can probably go on for 2 to 3 hours. I'm going to cut off there if you have any questions.
So is this where organizations are going wrong on the ground today? You know, you also said AI ambition runs way ahead of reality, and a lot of
Yeah.
people are very hesitant to admit that. So is that where they're going wrong, and what does it actually look like in practice?
So what I mean by that is there are companies that think that speed is the winner when it comes to AI, and they go head on in terms of investment
Yeah.
without really taking a break at understanding what the problem is. Where people and organizations are going to win is where precision comes in. Okay, so what do I think? What's the difference here? So boards are pushing, the shareholders are pushing to the AI, so they go in and invest in AI, and there's a big budget that gets deployed, and there's a lot of initiatives that go around, but it's 12 to 18 months down the road, there's a lot of activity and nothing to show for,
Yeah.
right? The organizations that are going to win actually going to take a pause. They're going to study AI and everything that I just said. And then they're going to see which aspect of AI will amplify the current business model. And they want to keep it very narrow. And then they're going to go all in on that problem, on the problem statement, which will actually amplify the business problem. So people are going to invest first are not necessarily going to come out on top. People are going to take time to understand AI and problem and strategize it perfectly or properly, I guess, not perfectly. There's nothing perfect about strategy. And understand the upsides and going to come up with an asymmetric strategy, higher upside and lower downside. They are going to win the race. And this is where things are actually going wrong. They put AI and then they figure out, which problem are we not going to tackle through? Which problems do we have that we can pass through AI? It's not the other way around. Figure out a problem, study it, and there's a framework you need to develop and pass it through that framework and see if it qualifies for AI.
Yeah.
Otherwise, use a different solution, which would probably give you a better outcome than AI would ever give you an outcome for. So there's a lot of rethinking that needs to get around this. And the other things that are getting wrong is you put AI, but you have the same old org charts. You have the same old decision pathways, which then hinder onto this new technology that requires a different way of thinking. So the traditional way of decision making you and I do on a daily basis is you see, you assess, you make a decision, and you act.
Yeah.
All these 4 aspects, you need to rethink them with AI around, right?
Yeah.
Maybe AI can see, assess, and decide, and the act part should be human.
Yeah.
Right? Or somewhere in the middle, and you could reconfigure based on what the use case is all about. But none of these strategies have these 4 things built in it. How do we go and reconfigure now that we have AI in our corporate environment?
On that, you also mentioned that, at scale, you're no longer scaling technology, you're negotiating with the infrastructure. And that, I think that ties into what you've just been saying. So what does that actually mean on the ground?
On the ground, that means you have to involve a lot of parties other than the chief data officer.
Yeah.
I think it's the chief data officer that needs to involve a lot of parties. They need to involve the regulator. They need to involve the compliance guys. They need to employ internal audit. Most and foremost, they need to employ the legal team within the organization because there's a lot of things that people get wrong in terms of the legal aspect of things. And their biggest partners in crime will be cybersecurity team.
Yeah.
At that scale, you can't miss cybersecurity and legal. Cybersecurity and legal will be the biggest players in the organization.
You were talking earlier about what the implications and what could happen, to you. So that is really important. And I think, the governance side, the legal side, that's very overlooked when it comes to technology and to AI, especially. I've noticed that gap in a lot of conversations.
That's because it requires a lot of reading. It's very boring. It's very cumbersome. Right.
I'm glad you said it.
That's where I think you win the game, because I've said this again in my LinkedIn somewhere. There's a regulatory arbitrage that is happening right now. In the Middle East, in Qatar, UAE, you don't have an AI Act. You have principles, and you have a 2030 vision strategy, and you're not going to be penalized for doing something absolutely wrong. So you can get ahead and do a lot of things here. But EU, you're going to be blocked. Let's say if I built a chatbot, right? And that chatbot, right now, when I left, handed it over to business, had 1 million users, right?
Wow.
Right. If I was building a chat, so in EU AI Act, there's 4 levels of risk. There's a minimal risk, there's a limited risk, there's a high risk, and there's an unacceptable risk. Okay. So if I build a chatbot, that would place me in a limited risk zone. So I have to comply with everything over there. But if I am going to build a biometric AI use case real time, that is going to be on the unacceptable risk.
Okay.
Can I do that here right now? I probably can.
Wow. Wow.
Right? Can I build a chatbot without worrying about too many acts and regulations to go through? Yes, I can. Here in UAE,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Suddenly, if that chatbot is going to be used in Europe, it's a different issue, right? And if it'll be European citizens, there'll be European clients. It's a different thing. But the hurdle rate is much lower in terms of regulatory and governance here right now than it is in Europe.
Do you think
So
that's going to
take
change
advantage of
anytime
it.
soon? Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, what is happening on the background is a lot of countries are trying to get together to converge on the governance rules and standards. US is going its own path, and they're saying follow us, and we're not going to listen to everyone else. Europe and China has converged on the posture.
Okay.
Earlier in 2025, when it was 2024, the UN General Assembly and all its members signed up on an initiative where there's going to be an AI governance council or something in the United Nations. So all the countries are going to converge. This is going to start up wars, geopolitics, trade issues. So like the Nuclear Proliferation Council and the Climate Change Council that you have in the UN, they're now going to go have an artificial intelligence council.
Wow.
So the convergence is going to come. But it's going to take time, right?
Yeah.
Right now, it's a lot of fragmentation going on. And so you need to figure out how to make sure that you use this for your own advantage. Because once the level playing field is going to be the same, that everyone's going to play with the same rules, so there's no advantage that you're going to have, right? So there's a lot of advantage that you can have right now, but there's a lot of barriers too.
Yeah.
You cannot, if you comply to a loose governance not a loose, but a lesser of a governance here in GCC, you suddenly might not be able to go into the US or Europe, or you need to spend more, and your barriers of entry will be higher when you go down to Europe and those and the US markets. So yes, this is all about AI, and the CDO should actually think about these things, because this is where the advantage is going to come from.
I agree. Now, with a realistic AI strategy with what you've just said in mind, and especially for the GCC region, what does that look like? I mean, what should leaders be evaluating? We've mentioned bringing in all the different departments, governance, what the future looks like. What should they really be evaluating, and what does that strategy actually look like on the ground and in real time?
Yeah, so if I was the board or a CEO, there's many things I should be looking for, but there's one thing that I would prioritize, and it is what my diffusion strategy looks like.
Okay.
What that means is how fast and how and when am I going to get all my employees or all the people that I connect to be conversant or aware of or can use AI. And you should set a goal for that. None of the strategies set a goal for it. You should say 80% of my employees by 2030 should be able to use an AI tool.
Okay.
Right? And I see no diffusion strategy. I see technical charts. I see use cases. I see ROIs coming in. But where's the human side of the diffusions? And the diffusion strategy means you'll have to end up investing in that. You have to end up thinking of how you hire people, what kind of people you're going to hire. You got to lobby governments to put in programs in universities, graduate programs for people to come out into the market that already have an awareness of AI. So you have to go beyond your own borders as a CEO, which I think is your job anyways as a leader to do so. So that should be foremost, I think, because if you have a Ferrari, you don't know how to drive, you don't have a driver's license, what good is it, right? It's not going to take you anywhere. You're just going to look at it. You're going to be happy about it. You're going to brag about it. You're going to have some brownie points, You're going to go into a party and say, oh, look, I have a Ferrari. But it's not going to give you any good benefit, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to do that. I think diffusion strategy is something that everyone's looking. China has a very good diffusion strategy, like I just said. US has its own diffusion strategy, but that is let's say influenced by its national security strategy. And then in the UAE and GCC in Qatar, they have a really good diffusion strategy as well. There are a lot of universities that have been backed by the government. There's a lot of investment that are going in there. But I think the connection needs to be much more stronger. And the second thing on ground, what they need to look at is they really need to rethink their organization. You cannot have old org charts, old decision patterns, while AI is there. If you're asking AI to make a decision, you still have another guy who's making a decision. They're going to conflict. And guess who's going to come out on the top is the guy who's going to make the decision, going to come out on top and say, hey, this outcome by AI is not good. I'm better than that. It's human nature. So you need to rethink your policies around that as well, not just implement that technology.
Yeah.
So I give an example to people on my organization. Future managers will have two kinds of employees. They're going to have a human employee and they're going to have a digital employee. I can bring in a human employee into my room and ask them, hey, how did you end up reaching this decision? What am I going to do with my digital employee? I need to know the tools.
Yeah.
I need to understand the tools. And future managers are not going to delegate tasks. They're going to orchestrate tasks. They're going to ask different agents to do different things when problems and tasks come in. So they need to know which tools to orchestrate, human and digital, to achieve a certain task. So it's going to be about orchestration. So that's what you have. You have humans and agents in orchestration. So is your workforce ready for that? I don't think so.
Yeah. Because they also, the agents, the digital tools, the digital employees are becoming so sophisticated so quickly, but they still have their own little bugs. They're still doing that. And then you bring in the human element into it. That must be a tough thing to manage across the organization, especially with things changing so quickly as they are.
Yeah. So humans can do so much. So you got to, like I said in the beginning, narrow it down, see which decision you're going to impact is most important for you and your organization, and go deep in AI on that. And then you can expand horizontally once you're over the curve. If you do everything together, I don't think it's going to work out. Every organization needs time to change. The humans need to change. The supervisors, the managers, they need to relearn, retool themselves. And that's where it really gets complicated, because you want to build 100 agents, but you don't have trained your managers how to orchestrate them.
Yeah. So is that what you would say to leaders, that they need to rethink, or is there something in particular that you think you would say to leaders, you need to rethink this about your AI strategy? What would it be?
Yeah, a lot of things that I need to rethink about the AI strategy. One is, don't try to be the fastest. Like I said before, I'm going to repeat that again. Don't try to be the fastest. And your key of your success is going to be on your humans and your human resources. And to the right decision, you're going to reach on your infrastructure. Everything in the middle is sorted. The models are amazing. The mathematical algorithms behind them are amazing. The data can be manipulated, changed, and brought up to good quality. That can all be done. But if you're looking to get scale and you're looking to get things de-risked, you need to have your infrastructure right, because a lot of risk comes from there, and your humans right, because they're going to code in the wrong stuff for you. So, like I say, the weakest link in any governance or ethics is humans, right? So if you're not going to train them on being ethical and understand what's going on in the model, then, things could creep in that you might not even know of. So those strategies, everything else I think is wonderful in AI. I think there's nothing to be afraid of. The models are tried and tested. You can come up with the best results ever. The data problems could be overcome with a lot of hard work. If there are data problems, you can find good resource and talent, but not a lot of them. But you really need to think about your operational model and your business model.
Yeah, I agree with that. Jawad, on that note, I'm going to wrap this up. If do you have any last thoughts, anything that you want to share about infrastructure before I thank you and I say goodbye?
There's a lot of things about infrastructure and AI. I think I would make one other point, is to don't forget the context. Don't forget where you are, right? Understand your environment, understand your customers, and then holistically decide how they are going to impact on your infrastructure. So don't look at, oh, I need a shiny NVIDIA, or I need a shiny Ascend chip from Huawei.
Yeah.
Marketing is gonna go right through and try to motivate you. You really need to be realistic, be a little old school. That's how we decided before. We looked at our target markets. We looked at our competitive advantages. We looked at which markets we're going to penetrate. And then we made decisions on the business model and what we're good at. So don't leave what you're good at. Don't leave AI to decide on what you're good at. Because what you're good at as a human, I don't think AI is there to replicate it yet.
I think so many people would agree with you there. That's absolutely right. Well, Jawad, thank you so much. That was really insightful, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join me. And hopefully, we'll see you at MEBIS this year. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to follow the podcast and stay connected as we bring other conversations with other leaders. Until next time, goodbye.